Hello, my name is Dr. Richard A. Cassidy. I am a toxicologist. I've been studying health effects of Chlordane for 25 years. I have tested levels of Chlordane and heptachlor in the area of over 500 homes and compare occupants' health with Chlordane exposure. Inhabitants of homes contaminated with Chlordane and heptachlor complain of diabetes. If you have insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, this video could help you reverse these diseases. I will share overwhelming evidence that Chlordane, heptachlor, or the metabolites in our body increase the risk of diabetes and obesity. I will share surprising research results indicating that obesity without persistent chemicals in our blood does not cause diabetes. I will show that where you live is as important as what you eat in determining your risk for diabetes. I will end this video with how metabolites of Chlordane and or heptachlor that accumulate in our bodies cause insulin resistance and diabetes. Why has the health of Americans deteriorated so much since World War II? Besides Mexico, the United States has the highest rates of diabetes in the world. By a considerable amount, Americans have the highest rates of obesity in the world. Since the late 1950s, the percentage of Americans with diabetes has increased almost tenfold, 1,000%. The rates of diabetes and obesity have increased parallel, suggesting that the same risk factors are causing both. Why does the United States have the highest rates of diabetes and obesity in the world? After considerable research, it is now determined that genetic factors related to diabetes explain only 10% of the risk. This leaves 90% of the risk of developing diabetes due to environmental factors. All content in this video is based on peer-reviewed scientific publications. See references on bottom left corner and a list at the end of video. Between 1999 and 2002, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, conducted National Health and Nutrition Examination Surveys. In these surveys, over 2,000 participants provided serum samples for measurement of glucose and various persistent organic pollutants. Using these results, investigators made striking and surprising discoveries that contradict current doctrine. 1. Obese participants without detectable levels of persistent organic pollutants in their blood had very low rates of diabetes, indicating that obesity did not cause diabetes. 2. Whereas participants with high levels of these persistent pollutants had a 38-fold increase in diabetes. 3. These persistent pollutants did interact with obesity to increase the risk of diabetes. 4. Oxychlordane and nanochlor had the highest associated risk of diabetes. Since these surprising and striking results were published, 6 additional studies have consistently shown that of all the organic pollutants found in serum collected by national and international surveys, it is the metabolites of heptachlordane, heptachloroperoxide, and oxychlordane that are the most associated with the risk of diabetes. Heptachlordane is a mixture of 4 main compounds: heptachlor, cis-chlordane, trans-chlordane, and nanochlor. Human and animal livers convert these compounds into stable epoxides called heptachloroperoxide and oxychlordane that accumulate in our bodies. 3 different investigations using data from 3 different surveys conducted in the United States showed that oxychlordane in participants' serum increased the risk of diabetes from 260 to 650%. Oxychlordane in serum of participants of foreign surveys also linked to higher risk of diabetes. 2 investigations using data from in-hand surveys conducted later that included measurements of serum levels of heptachloroperoxide revealed that heptachloroperoxide and oxychlordane increased the risk of diabetes more than all other assessed chemicals. And secondly, heptachloroperoxide had the highest risk of diabetes among 266 environmental factors tested. Oxychlordane in serum has an even higher associated risk of insulin resistance, increasing the risk by 870%. As in investigations of diabetes, increased body weights without this insecticide did not increase the risk of insulin resistance. However, body weight as measured by waist circumference did interact with oxychlordane to increase the risk of insulin resistance. The risk of insulin resistance was 3 times greater in participants with the highest waist circumference compared to the lowest. The investigators stated that, quote, "Chlordane may be the most important persistent organic pollutant involved in pathogenesis of type 2 diabetes by influencing insulin resistance." Other investigators reported that higher levels of heptachloropoxide and oxychlordane in human serum were associated with greater risk of obesity. These 10 epidemiologic reports linked heptachloropoxide and/or oxychlordane in serum with the prevalence of insulin resistance, diabetes, and obesity. However, cause and effect can only be determined for certain by controlling all variables in a laboratory setting. I exposed pregnant rats and their offspring to environmentally relevant levels of technochlordane to generate specific heptachloropoxide concentration in the serum. When heptachloropoxide in rat serum was equivalent to the 99th percentile heptachloropoxide in serum of NHANES participants, body weights of young, sexually mature rat offspring increased by 8%. At 5 times this 99th percentile, the body weights of rats increased by 12%. Greater weight differentials would be expected as offspring age. The red line is the offspring with heptachloropoxide serum levels found in the top 1% of the population, resulting in an 8% weight gain. The black line is 5 times this concentration, resulting in a 12% weight gain. Technochlordane was developed by chance after World War II using byproducts of synthetic rubber production. Agricultural use began in the late 1940s, and treatment of homes for termites began soon after. Heptachlor and chlordane were banned in 1974 for agricultural uses and in 1988 for residential termite treatment. The Environmental Protection Agency has determined that over 30 million homes and millions of acres of cropland were treated. Vesical continued production until 1997 for exports. Between 1991 and 1994, over 4 million pounds of chlordane and over 5 million pounds of heptachlor were exported, mainly to Asia, Australia, and South and Central America. Similarities are apparent between the rate of termite infestation, technochlordane treatment, top, and the prevalence of diabetes, bottom left, and obesity, bottom right. The lower rates of diabetes and obesity in Florida, Georgia, and California as compared to the chlordane treatment map is probably due to the higher rates of immigration in those states. The correspondence between these maps suggests that treatment of homes for termite infestation with technochlordane is a major risk factor for diabetes and obesity. Heptachlor and chlordane levels in indoor air of homes vary with the site of technochlordane application. The highest level of heptachlor and chlordane are found in the air of the basement and in the rooms above when technochlordane was applied beneath the basement floor. The next highest levels are found in the air of homes when technochlordane was applied to the soil beneath concrete slabs. Then levels in indoor air of homes with treatment to soil below the crawl space. The lowest levels are found when chlordane was applied only to the soil outside the house foundation. The Environmental Protection Agency reported that the daily exposure to chlordane heptachlor is 10 to 20 times higher from breathing the air in the average chlordane-treated home, 4,500 to 6,200 nanograms per day, as compared to levels of heptachlor and chlordane in an average diet, 335 nanograms per day. This comparison increased to 30-fold when the higher concentration of heptachlor and chlordane found in chlordane-treated homes at the 90th percentile were used, 9,800 nanograms per day. If these results are extrapolated nationwide, then of the 30 million homes treated with chlordane, 3 million would have heptachlor and chlordane levels 30 times those found in the average diet. I tested the indoor air of 150 homes nationwide from 2005 to 2009 and found that concentration of heptachlor and chlordane in the air varied over 100-fold. The average concentration of heptachlor and chlordane was 190 nanograms per cubic meter of air tested, and the concentration at the 90th percentile was 496 nanograms per cubic meter of air. The medium concentration of heptachlor and Chlordane in homes tested nationwide, as expressed in total technical Chlordane, is almost 10 times the level considered safe, the minimum risk level, by the Centers for Disease Control. This comparison increases 65-fold when the concentration at the 90th percentile is used. The levels of heptachlor epoxide in adipose tissue and oxychlordane in mother's milk fat from individuals in the South are up to 200-300% other regions of the United States and corresponds to Chlordane treatment of homes for termites. The levels of heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane in Americans' fat increase with age and mimic the age-related increase in diabetes. The increase in age-related levels of heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane indicate that current exposures still exceed detoxification mechanisms. Epidemiological investigations have reported the risk of insulin resistance and diabetes increase with the concentration of long-chain fatty acids in plasma phospholipids. Stearic and palmitic fatty acids have the longest carbon chains of the abundant saturated fatty acids and increase the risk of diabetes by about 200 to 400%. These long-chain fatty acids increase as the percentage of total fatty acids in overweight individuals. One way these long-chain saturated fatty acids could increase insulin resistance and diabetes is their ability to solubilize highly lipophilic chemicals like heptachlor and Chlordane. Blood plasma is 95% water. For the very hydrophobic heptachlor and Chlordane and their epoxides to be absorbed by ingestion or inhalation, to be transported in the blood, or to be stored in membranes of cells or other lipid compartments, require lipophilic carriers like stearic and palmitic fatty acids. This figure illustrates that stearic and palmitic fatty acids can solubilize lipophilic chemicals like heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane up to 110 times better, respectively, than other fatty acids not linked to diabetes. Dietary sources of stearic and palmitic fatty acids are found predominantly in animal fat and to a lesser degree in plant oils such as corn and soybeans. For persons breathing heptachlor and Chlordane in the air of their homes, the level and type of lipids in their blood could have a major health effect. Exercise is known to lower saturated fatty acids and also to reduce serum levels of oxychlordane. Numerous investigations indicated that oxidative stress is the leading cause of insulin resistance and diabetes, with increased levels of nitric oxide playing a pivotal role. Patients have higher levels of inducible nitric oxide synthase, inflammatory cytokines such as tumor necrosis factor, and end products of nitric oxide such as nitrites, nitrates, nitrotyrosine, and S-nitrosylation of proteins. Oxidants, especially nitric oxide, desensitize insulin effects on glucose uptake in muscle and fat cells, resulting in insulin resistance. Nitric oxide also causes damage in pancreatic beta cells, lowering insulin synthesis, leading to diabetes. Resident leukocytes, called macrophages, and infiltrating leukocytes in pancreas, fat, and muscle cells during chronic inflammation produce a variety of oxidants. Many are listed at the top of this slide. Nitric oxide, abbreviated NO, is unique in that it is a lipophilic gas that can permeate lipid membranes surrounding cells, regulating or damaging those cells depending on nitric oxide concentration. Oxidant can damage lipids, proteins, and DNA of the cell. Heptachlor epoxide increased nitric oxide production in leukocytes in a concentration-dependent manner. Tumor necrosis factor further increased production of nitric oxide and lowered the concentration of heptachlor epoxide by an order of magnitude required to reach maximum production of nitric oxide. NMMA inhibits the enzyme that produces nitric oxide, indicating that oxidant produced is nitric oxide. ICI and tamoxifen are blockers of the estradiol receptor. This slide shows that heptachlor epoxide is a xenoestrogen that activates nitric oxide synthase by binding to the estradiol receptor. The combination of low-level heptachlor epoxide and tumor necrosis factor produced a 600% increase in DNA breaks in isolated leukocytes, and again lowered the concentration of heptachlor epoxide by an order of magnitude required to produce maximum DNA breaks. Obesity is known to be associated with higher levels of inflammatory cytokines like tumor necrosis factor in the pancreas, fat, and muscle of insulin resistance and diabetic patients. These isolated leukocyte studies explain the synergistic interaction of heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane with obesity, resulting in high rates of insulin resistance and diabetes observed in the epidemiological investigation. Conversely, individuals with either low body weights having low inflammation or low levels of heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane did not have insulin resistance and diabetes. In summary, multiple lines of research providing overwhelming evidence indicates heptachlor and chlordane and their metabolites, heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane, are the risk factors for insulin resistance, diabetes, and obesity. 1. Heptachlor and technochlordane were produced only in the United States. The United States has the highest rates of insulin resistance, diabetes, and obesity in the world. 2. Numerous epidemiological studies indicated that heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane in serum has the highest associated risk with these diseases. 3. Body burden of heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane increase with age and matches age-related increase in prevalence of these diseases. 4. High rates of termite infestation and home chlordane treatment in the South matches heptachlor epoxide and oxychlordane level in fat and the prevalence of these diseases in the South compared to other regions. And finally, 5. Heptachlor epoxide induced nitric oxide production and cellular damage in human leukocytes. These effects are increased with the inflammatory mediator and matches our current understanding of the pathogenesis of insulin resistance and diabetes. If you or a loved one have insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes and live in a home built before 1990, then the easiest way to reverse these diseases may start with testing the air in your home. If I can answer your questions, or if you would like to test your home, please call or email. Also, my website has additional information that you may find helpful.